The story begins in the future. Sounds weird, right? The protagonist records a video in which he talks about the darkness of our future. He emphasizes that it is scary and unpredictable.
Have fun.
But the cameraman, Casey, keeps interrupting him. The girl tells him that he should not scare people, and she asks him to start by telling about his childhood. We go back in time when Frank is just a little boy. He gets off the bus to attend the New York World's Fair. He brought a jet backpack with him to enter an invention contest. Frank takes the invention to the staff, David Nix, and asks him for $50. David is a little amazed at what he has in front of him. As he explains how it works, a young girl named Athena, who's about his age, arrives. She thinks his invention is phenomenal. It really is, but it needs some work because it's not able to really fly. Nix prods him by asking him how it is useful to humanity. Frank thinks his creation is funny and inspiring, but Nix tells him it should be something more than funny and denies his admission to the competition. Nevertheless, Frank does not intend to give up and tells him that he will make it work.
I'm not giving up.
This is not the first time he's been rejected like this. He has already had to overcome his father's ruthlessly practical objections. Meanwhile, Athena seems to be on his side. In fact, a little later, she sneaks away from her father and offers to help Frank, putting a mysterious badge in his hand. Frank dons the badge and climbs into It's a Small World. He moves alone through the ride in a boat that is hijacked through some tunnels. At one point, a laser scans his badge, and Frank takes another route. He enters a kind of subway wagon that seems to move through time and space. Frank wakes up in the same place, but in another dimension. He opens the door, and it looks just like the future. Everything is wide and surrounded by clouds. When he looks up, he sees a small spaceship in the distance carrying Athena and Nix. Suddenly, robotic arms appear. They start building a bridge. Frank is startled and falls off the edge of the platform, but he falls onto another bridge. There, he encounters an even larger robot with big, glowing eyes, who picks up his jetpack. For a second, Frank is annoyed, but then realizes he's fixing it. Soon after, security guards arrive and Frank jumps off the platform. He manages to pick up the jetpack as it falls and jumps into the sky just a few feet from the ground. The jetpack works perfectly, and Frank is able to admire Tomorrowland. Everything is gleaming and futuristic, with tall, arched buildings. Then he meets Athena, who takes his hand to show him the city. Here, the scene stops with Frank talking to the camera. He is again interrupted by Casey. The girl begins to talk about her story. From an early age, she harbored a passion for stars and cosmology in general. Her dream was to visit the stars, hoping to find all the answers to her questions. She went from being an optimistic and lovable little girl to a rebellious and pessimistic teenager. Casey rides a motorcycle and uses drones to break into the NASA demolition complex. Meanwhile, Athena is keeping an eye on her in the darkness. She manages to get in undetected to damage some circuits. She then sneaks back home but is caught by her younger brother.
Identify yourself.
He is aware that she's trying to stop the destruction of NASA's platform to prevent their father from losing his job since he is a NASA engineer. At that moment, Athena secretly takes a lock of Casey's hair to get his DNA. She synchronizes it with an identical badge she gave to Frank. The next day, we realize that Casey is definitely an electronics and robotics genius. She solves in an instant an electrical circuit problem that her father was working on. Her father informs her that 3 cranes were sabotaged the night before, and he realizes that she did it. He has been losing hope lately, but Casey tries to motivate him.
Okay, fine, don't answer.
Then we see Casey at school, clearly not the right place for a genius like her. That night, she goes to the NASA platform again, but this time she's arrested by the police. When she's released, her confiscated items are returned to her. Among the items, she also finds Athena's badge. She tells the policeman that the badge is not hers, but the moment she touches it, the world around her disappears, and she finds herself in the future. She is shocked, but scared and excited at the same time. Her father takes her from the police station and is furious. She tries to tell him about the badge,
I need you to be NASA dad now.
but he's too upset to listen. She asks him to touch it to believe, but nothing happens when he touches the badge. He seizes it from her, thinking she's going out of her mind. That night at home, Casey takes the badge from her father's room and begins to explore Tomorrowland. But as she walks into the magical world, she also moves into the real world and bumps into walls and eventually falls down the stairs. The father, Eddie, wakes up but then goes back to bed. So Casey decides to go outside to find a spacious place to venture into Tomorrowland. She takes her bicycle and arrives at an empty field. She picks up the pin again and finds herself in the center of Tomorrowland. Casey begins to explore the city and takes a trip on the futuristic subway.
You can see me?
We don't have all day.
She meets teenagers her age who are having fun with Frank's jet backpack. She learns that the people she interacts with are actually robots who can see and talk to her. She then follows an astronaut girl who later invites Casey to join her on a space expedition. As Casey heads toward them, the time on the badge runs out, causing her to return to reality, where she is now swimming in a swamp. Casey runs home and asks her brother to access her father's PC. They do some research on the badge and find a Texas store that wants to buy one. Casey asks him to cover for her while she goes to Texas to find out more about the badge. Casey leaves for a long bus ride there. In the process, she draws the world of Tomorrowland on a sheet of paper. The next day, Athena shows up at Casey's house and meets Nate. The boy lies to her when she asks him about Casey. Athena puts pressure on the boy, and eventually, Nate reveals to her where Casey is going. Athena seems worried. In fact, she immediately sets off to catch up with Casey. Now, in Texas, Casey arrives at the store. The owners, Hugo and Ursula, marvel at the sight of the badge.
Hugo Kern's back. How may I help you?
The two urge her to say who gave her the brooch. She keeps saying she doesn't know. On the other hand, Ursula keeps asking about a young girl. Casey is very confused and is about to leave, but Hugo begins to reveal details about the badge. Casey realizes that they also know about Tomorrowland and continues to talk to them, but the two of them demand where she got it from, and they talk about a young girl again. At this point, Casey tries to leave, but suddenly the two pull out two plasma pistols and point them at her. She tries to hide, but is eventually cornered by the couple. Just before they shoot her, Athena arrives and throws a time bomb that stops time for a short period. She grabs Casey's hand and pulls her out.
We need to go.
She asks her to follow, and Casey accepts. Next, Athena manages to knock out Hugo and Ursula, who turn out to be robots. The two girls escape before the robots self-destruct. They get into a car, and Athena tries to explain what is going on, but her voice has a glitch. She's revealed to be a robot as she begins to repair her translator. Athena explains that she gave her last badge, but Casey ran off before Athena could explain what it was. Casey stops listening and plugs hard on the brakes. She runs from the car, and Athena starts to follow her, but is hit by a car. Casey steals the car while the man checks on Athena, but the robot gets up and starts chasing Casey.
This isn't happening. This isn't happening.
Athena manages to catch up with her and reveals to Casey the people of Tomorrowland have done something terrible that has ruined the world. She asks Casey to trust her because she can help prevent the end of the world. Meanwhile, agents sent by David Nix arrive at Hugo and Ursula's store. Their mission is to find Athena and Casey. The police find Ursula's robotic head and ask the officers for an explanation. To eliminate witnesses and possible suspects, the officer neutralizes them with his gun. Returning to the two girls, Casey begins to ask many questions about the mission she will have to face. Athena activates the self-defense protocol and shuts down so as not to reveal any more information to Casey. Soon after, Casey stops to leave a message for her father, telling him that she had to lie to Nate about where she went. Finally, she promises him that she will be back soon. The next day, the girls are still on the road. Casey asks her why she gave her the last badge, and Athena says that she is special. Casey asks who they are going to, and Athena reveals Frank's name to her.
His name is Frank.
That's right, the Frank from the beginning of the movie. Casey falls asleep and then wakes up outside on the street. Athena drops her off at Frank's house and leaves. Casey approaches and is greeted by a vicious dog. She's startled and starts running and notices that it has not left footprints on the ground. In fact, the dog turns out to be a hologram. Casey knocks on the door and shows the pin to the camera. Frank tells her to leave, and a powerful explosion repels Casey. Frank comes out and tells her again to leave. He reveals to her that the world she has seen was just a commercial recorded decades ago. He tells her that she has been lied to about being special, but the girl has no intention of leaving and stays by the door throughout the evening. At one point, Casey notices that the house is surrounded by cameras and decides to get Frank's attention. In fact, Frank sees on the cameras that Casey sets his tractor on fire. He takes his improved fire extinguisher and puts out the fire, turning the tractor into a large chunk of ice. At that moment, Casey manages to sneak onto his house and lock Frank out. Casey looks around the house, which looks like a secret military base. She finds a recording device that shows the childish version of Frank. He and Athena were in a lab, and Frank was trying to make her laugh, but he failed because Athena is a robot. But it seems that he didn't know at the time that Athena was just a machine. Casey enters a room and notices screens and a stopwatch indicating 59 days until the end of the world. On the screens, we can see the events that will bring the end of the world: wars, forest fires, and other natural natural disasters. In the process, Frank finally manages to get back into the house. He reveals to her that he was kicked out of Tomorrowland by Nix.
They threw me out.
You may wonder why. Frank has built a machine that can predict the future, which is why he can predict the end of the world with almost 100% accuracy. Frank tells her that he can even find out the date of her death if she wants to know. On the other hand, Casey says she wants to know because that way she could change her fate. In the same way, she believes they can do something to prevent the end of the world. Hope seems to arise in Frank, but suddenly a group of robots shows up outside his house. The agents have received orders from Nix to eliminate him because he's hiding Casey inside his house. The robots try to enter the house, but Frank is well prepared.
Who the hell is Governor Nix?
It seems that Frank had been preparing for this attack for years. He has set many traps inside, and the walls of the house are so resistant that even the weapons of the future cannot penetrate them. The two eliminate the robots and run for the bathroom. They get into the tub while another robot hangs onto it. They jump into the air, and the tub turns out to be an escape pod. They land on a lake, and Frank's house explodes after he has activated the self-destruct mode. They come out of the lake, and Frank tries to start a motorcycle. Unfortunately, the motorcycle does not start, but here comes Athena to pick them up in the car. Frank is shocked when he sees her.
Hello, Frank.
It seems that Athena has offended him severely, but in truth, Frank was in love with her. Then he learned that she was just a robot whose job was to recruit qualified people to take to Tomorrowland. They arrive in a private area and enter an office where the teleportation machine built by Frank is located. They enter the teleportation pod where Frank covers Casey's eyes with a black sheet and forces her to ingest some powder. Athena sets the destination at the Eiffel Tower and joins the two. Time travel has dramatically lowered Casey's blood sugar levels, and Athena gives her 2 bottles of Coke. Casey is surprised to find herself at the top of the Eiffel Tower. She has never been outside the United States.
We're in Paris?
At the top of the tower, they notice a security guard. Frank gives Casey a weapon that, just by touching the victim, knocks him out in an instant. In fact, that is what Casey does. Then they enter a secret room where they find dummies of Gustave Eiffel, Jules Verne, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison. They are the co-founders of Plus Ultra, a secret organization that invented Tomorrowland. Frank is aware of a secret passage and activates the Spectacle, a one-way ticket to Tomorrowland. Suddenly, a huge space plane rises from under the Eiffel Tower. People are left speechless and start taking pictures. In the meantime, Nix's robot agents are again on the trail of Frank and the girls. Fortunately, the three manage to get on the space rocket and launch it into the sky in time before the robots catch up with them. Then, a capsule splits off from the rocket and stops at a point in space. After that, they begin to fall at high speed to Earth. But at one point, they enter another dimension. They land on point in the real Tomorrowland. Upon arrival, Frank delivers a very powerful bomb to Athena in case they're captured. Soon after, Nix, along with other police, shuttles in to greet them. Nix has now become the governor of the city, but he doesn't seem intent on killing the three. In fact, he seems almost charmed to see Frank again after so long. Nix seems surprised that Athena is also back. She used to work for Nix as a recruiter, but then David ordered her to be disassembled, so she ran away. The rocket that left Paris created a lot of uproars, but that doesn't matter now because David says the end of the world is now inevitable. But Casey disagrees. In fact, Frank tells David that she is the one who can repair the monitor, the machine that can predict the future. By doing so, they will be able to save the world. David takes them to the monitor, and they get on a special platform. The platform is able to show what will happen in a few seconds in the future thanks to tachyons. Casey loses her father's cap, poor girl. They arrive at the monitor, which is nothing more than a globe of the Earth that can show events at any given time. Frank built it many years ago when he was still living in Tomorrowland. Casey begins experimenting with the globe and travels into the 3-day past when she was talking to her father about sabotaging the cranes. Frank reveals to her that the monitor can also predict the future, and it is here that Casey discovers the cruel truth. She sets the device in the future, showing the destroyed NASA platform. Then she travels around the world and sees riots and natural disasters, pointing to the end of the world. But unfortunately, Nix and Frank have lost hope. Casey suggests transporting people from Earth into Tomorrowland to save them, but David says their ruinous nature will bring chaos here as well. When Casey walks away, the monitor has some kind of malfunction, showing a healthy, bright world. Frank is shocked, believing there's still a small chance to save the world, but David hits him with a weapon and locks the three of them in a kind of futuristic cell. Casey realizes that the monitor doesn't show events that will happen, but what might happen. She suggests turning off the monitor to avoid inspiring negativity in people, because instead of motivating them to change things, the monitor convinces them more and more that the end of the world is inevitable. Soon after, security guards arrive and take them to Nix. He's already preparing a device to transport them to the real world, to a beach that is not on the map. Frank and Casey try to convince him that they must turn off the monitor, but on the one hand, there's no button to do so, and David reveals that he had shown the apocalypse to people as a warning. But humanity embraced it and refused to change its behavior to make the world a better place. People have tried to make money from it by creating video games, movies, and books about the end of the world. This has led to the belief that humanity has given up. By now, they're preparing to enter the portal, but when Frank shakes David's hand, he activates a command on his watch to lower the platform. Athena and Casey react and fight the guards, while David fights Frank. Frank tells the girls to go to the monitor and destroy it with the bomb he gave Athena. The robot gives the bomb to Casey, who manages to get on the platform while Athena fights the huge robots. Unfortunately, Nix had already used his watch to make the platform fall back, and Casey missed the opportunity to destroy the monitor. Since the bomb cannot be deactivated, Casey throws it into the real world through the portal, and it explodes on an uninhabited island. A piece of the portal falls on Nix, who attempts to shoot Frank, but Athena notices a moment before that happens and sacrifices herself. Frank wants to take her to a repair module, but Athena knows they have too little time. She will soon shut down and self-destruct. But first, she shows recordings saved in the system that talks about her and Frank. Athena suspected that Frank was in love with her, but she would not explain this because she was a robot. Nevertheless, she kept the truth that she was a robot hidden for a long time, so as not to hurt Frank and damage his potential. Finally, Athena suggests that Frank use her as a bomb to destroy the monitor. Frank transports her in his improved jetpack to the monitor. Before dropping her, Athena tells her that he has never been able to make her laugh because he's not funny. After that, the two give each other one last smile, and Frank drops her. Athena explodes and destroys the monitor. Afterward, Frank and Casey aim to turn the future into a better world. Casey returns home through the portal and recruits Nate and Eddie, while Frank is mass-producing the badge. Frank and Casey start recruiting other chosen people and give them a chance to create a better world. In turn, the recruited people must recruit other dreamers by delivering pins and sending them to various places around the world. It almost looks like a pyramid scheme, but the profit factor is missing. Thus, more and more optimistic people with good souls arrive in Tomorrowland, who are called dreamers. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2015 movie Tomorrowland by Brad Bird, starring George Clooney, Britt Robertson, Raffi Cassidy, and Hugh Laurie.